Hello everyone, welcome back to the Retro Horror Academy. My name is Daniel Richardson, and today we're going to be looking at the year in horror, 1958. So you know how we do it here. We go year by year. We rank the top 10 horror films of that year. And we start off though by doing the Horror Hall of Fame. And this year we have the largest induction date. We had the largest group of inductees for our Horror Hall of Fame. We got eight inductees. So let's get into it, shall we? Here are the Horror Hall of Fame class of 1958. We're going to start things off with Leif Erikson, not the Viking. He is an American actor of stage and screen. Some of the things he's done that we haven't covered in the world of horror. He did some episodes of Matinee Theater and Inner Sanctum, and he was in the film Invaders from Mars. But on this channel, we know him as the guy from Night Monster. Honestly, I don't remember much about Night Monster. I just remember Leif Erikson in that. So much so that I made a note like, I want this guy in our Hall of Fame when the time comes up. And you know what? It's time right now. So, there you go. Leif Erikson. Number 2, we got Åsa Madsen. She was a Danish actress. And it turned out she wound up having a very successful career in Hollywood, which really kind of surprised me because I just assumed, again, don't know anything about her beyond this, that she was just kind of a B-list horror actress. But no, she was actually like A-list fucking Hollywood. The only movie she actually did that we covered was in the world of horror was Cry of the Werewolf, and she was the gypsy, and I loved her so much in that, and I just assumed she did more. Like I watched the thing like, of course I assumed she's been in all the Universal horror films as a gypsy, but no, that's her only one. However, again, much like Leif Erikson, just that one role is enough to really kind of pull me in. So Åsa Madsen. Number 3, we have Ray Milland. He was a Welsh actor, and he actually won the Academy Award for the film The Last Weekend, which was the first time a Welsh actor has won that award. So he served in the British Army, and I think the 2 biggest movies he's going to be known for is The Uninvited and Dial M for Murder, the Alfred Hitchcock film. And at one point, he was Paramount's highest paid actor. The only other thing he did horror related that we did not cover was Alias, Nick Beale. However, on this channel, we know him as the lead in The Uninvited. And again, just such an iconic character and performance from this guy that, it'd be a shame to not include him in our Hall of Fame. So, number 4, Frank Moran. This guy was an American actor and boxer. In fact, he was in 2 different boxing matches with the World Heavyweight Champion. Of course, he didn't win either of them, but still, that's a pretty good accomplishment there. Movies that he was in that we did not cover in the world of horror: The Living Ghost, Lady of Burlesque, and Ghost on the Loose. However, the movies we did cover him in was The Corpse Vanishes, Return of the Ape Man, and The Man in Half Moon Street. Particularly, he stands out to me. I think his standout role was in Return of the Ape Man. That's what I like him in. So, good actor. Had a real good face. I felt like I felt like I'm surprised he wasn't more of a character actor beyond this. But like I said, it is what it is. At number 5, we have J. Carrol Naish, an American actor. Dude was in over 200 films during Hollywood's golden era, which is crazy. He was known as a master of dialect. Dude played so many different non-American roles, always playing some kind of minority or whatever. It's so much so that he actually got the nickname as Hollywood's one-man UN. And he would go on to be nominated for 2 Oscars. So, as far as movies we did not cover him on here, he did the movie Strange Confession. He was on an episode of Shirley Temple's Storybook, which I'm assuming that had to be a horror episode. He was on Calling Dr. Death and Jungle Woman. However, what we know him for on this show is Dr. Renault's Secret, The Monster Maker, House of Frankenstein, and The Beast with 5 Fingers. He's a guy that I think another just kind of, I don't know, underappreciated gem in the world of horror. Like, we get this from time to time. You think about, actors from this era, it's always Karloff, Lugosi, Chaney. But there's a handful that I think just, exceed that. And I feel like Nation's one of them. However, I was shocked to realize I thought he was in more movies than this. Like, whenever it came time to make this Hall of Fame, it was easy for me to nominate this guy, but then I was like, I thought he did so, like, I assumed he did so much more than this. And I was shocked that he really, as far as horror goes, he only kind of dipped his toes in from time to time, which is crazy. That was crazy, the fact that I actually thought he was also foreign as well, because he played so many foreigners in his run that when I found out the dude was literally just, American, he was like Irish American, it's like, really? Like, you never play a white guy, ever. Like, the closest you get was like Italian. And even then, you really laid on the thick accent, But no, he was a hell of an actor. And yeah, I mean, just the fact that I truly thought he was in more than he was just shows, the impact he had on me. So yeah, he's definitely in this Horror Hall of Fame. Number 6, we got Sam Newfield. He was an American director. He was one of the most prolific directors whose career, spanned from the silent era up until he retired this year of 1958. During the silent era, he actually at one point directed more than 20 films in 1 year. He was the kind of guy, he did not just, feature-length films, he did a lot of shorts. He also did a lot of, training videos and stuff. In fact, someone jokingly wrote, you just give, Sam any kind of money at all, he'll direct for you. Like, he didn't care. He didn't care what it was. Mostly directed for PRC Pictures, which is actually the studio that his brother ran. So yeah, he did, mostly westerns was like his big thing. However, he also was known to dabble with film noir and, of course, our genre, horror. Some stuff that he directed that we did not cover on here in the world of horror: Fight That Ghost, Dead Men Walk, and The Black Raven. But on this show, we know him as the director of The Mad Monster, The Monster Maker, and The Flying Serpent. And again, aside from the cheesiness of the serpent in The Flying Serpent, I still think it was a really well-directed movie. Actually, no, The Flying Serpent wasn't bad. That didn't look as cheesy. I'm thinking of the Giant Claw. That one looked cheesy as fuck. Yeah, no, Flying Serpent, this dude was solid in that. He directed the shit out of that. Yeah, so no. Retract what I said. Yeah, Sam Newfield definitely deserves a spot in the Horror Hall of Fame. Number 7 going into our inducting class this year, Lyle Talbot. If I'm mispronouncing that, I always Tabot. Anyways, American actor. He's going to be best known for playing the neighbor on the TV series The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, and he was a founding member of the Screen Actors Guild. Some stuff that he did that we did not cover on here. He did an episode of Matinee Theater. He did the film Untamed Women, Mesa of the Lost Women, Glen or Glenda, and The 13th Guest. However, on this channel, we know him for Torture Ship, The Mad Magician, and Plan 9 from Outer Space, which for me, his standout role is definitely Torture Ship. However, I do have a soft spot for him as far as Plan 9 from Outer Space goes. And our final inductee into the Horror Hall of Fame, George Wagner. He was an American actor, writer, director, and producer. No matter, not just in the world of horror, but I think just in cinema in general, he's going to be known as the director of The Wolfman more than anything else. Some stuff he did in the world of horror that we did not cover. He did the TV movie. He wrote and directed the TV movie Destination Nightmare. And he wrote and directed episodes of The Veil. And I believe when they kind of cobbled some episodes together to make a movie out of that, I believe they mostly used all of his episodes, or if not all, most of his episodes. So he's got his fingerprints all over that. On this channel, what we've covered him on, he was the writer-director of Man-Made Monster, the director and producer of The Wolfman, producer of The Ghost of Frankenstein, producer of Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and the writer, director, producer of The Climax. This guy has contributed so much, not just to the world of horror, but universal horror at that. So he's behind the camera for many of our favorite Universal Wolf Frankenstein movies here. So yeah, he definitely deserves to be in there. So one last roll call for everybody in the old Horror Hall of Fame. We got Leif Erikson, Åsa Messen, Ray Milland, Frank Moran, J. Carroll Naish, Sam Newfield, Lyle Talbot, and George Wagner. So there you guys are, the inducting class of 1958. Go ahead and take your place amongst the greats. So now we're going to jump into our top 10 horror films from 1958. So we're going to kick things off with number 10. And I am talking about Black Cat Mansion. So basically you got this this emperor, maybe he's a samurai too, I don't know, but he ends up killing somebody, and he killing the person and then like sexually assaulting his mother. I mean, it gets pretty fucked up. And anyways, as he's doing this, the woman calls out for the vengeful spirits to help her, and it takes the form of a cat. However, after this man, kind of, passes on his bloodline, this woman moves back into town with her, I can't remember if he's a samurai too or not, but anyway, with her boyfriend and or husband, and turns out now the cat is stalking her. So this is a Japanese horror film. And it's a part of the Ghost Cat horror films, which I didn't know was a thing, but I was starting to realize it was on my own without being told. Because we did, something similar to this back, a few movies ago, back in the 40s. I believe it actually had a similar title to Black Cat Mansion, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, but we had that, and then I recently watched a movie from like 1968 that was pretty much the same thing, called like The Cat or whatever. And every one of those things, they focused on this cat. And I was like, this must be a thing. The Ghost of Saga Mansion, that's what the older movie was I was trying to think of. Anyways, but every one of them dealt with the same storyline of someone basically killing someone, and then the loved ones of the surviving loved ones end up calling upon the spirits who take the form of a cat every time. So yeah, Ghost Cat horror, it's a thing. Anyways, this movie was never dubbed, nor was it ever released in America. However, despite that, it still got decent reviews. This movie I really enjoyed. I thought it was a damn solid good movie. I'm enjoying, like I said, I've been going through these Japanese horror films, these older ones. I'm a big fan of J-horror in general, but like my knowledge of it really just goes back to like Ringu and Up. Because whenever I discovered The Ring, I loved it, and I heard it was a remake, so I wanted to watch it, and at that point, I got sucked into J-horror. But again, admittedly, I just know things like from 2000 and on. That's it. So going back and watching these old black and white Japanese horror films, I'm really digging it. Well, some of them color too. But anyway, these older ones. And like I said, despite the fact that they're very similar, there's just an eeriness to them. This one's very eerie. Every time you see the old woman kind of walking towards the house, it's creepy. That's the best way to describe it. And like I said, even though it's very similar to the Mansion Saga, whatever, previous film, I don't know. I think this is actually the best one I've seen so far. Although, spoiler alert, when we get to 1968, if the other one makes the list, that'll probably be, take this one, because the other Black Cat movie was really good as well. But as far as Black Cat Mansions from 1958 goes, solid thumbs up. This thing's got a 6.5 on IMDb, and I'd even say give it a little higher than that, but that's just my opinion. So anyways, moving on now to number 9, we have Blood of the Vampires. So basically, this guy, he's a mad scientist put to death for being a mad scientist. The rumor has it, he's a vampire. And anyways, even though he's put to death, he's staked through the heart. However, his henchman digs him up, and they're able to perform this heart transplant on him. And so he survives to bring out and do his mad science work continues. This is a British horror film, and this was actually made because of the success of The Curse of Frankenstein. So British horror, it's on the boom right now, thanks to Hammer Studios. So the posters for this movie would suggest that this is actually a porno. A lot of people actually thought this was a porn film. Which the producers truly embraced, because they knew it'd be easier to sell this to American drive-ins during the era, and that's where the money was starting to get made, was the drive-in circuit. So, it worked out for them. This film got mixed reviews upon its release. I read this is actually the first horror film to be released on VHS, which seems kind of crazy to me. I feel like that'd be something bigger and more well-known, but apparently Blood of the Vampires, that's what it was. Actually, many fans actually thought this was a Hammer horror film. Basically, because it had the very similar look, but it also had the same guy, that Jimmy Sangster, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He wrote, Curse of Frankenstein and Horror of Dracula. And so I guess, people just kind of associated, Hammer, and they assumed this was Hammer as well. This is another one I really liked. Had kind of a prison vibe to it, which I really dug. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say beyond that. I mean, it follows the standard mad science trope. Of course, the term vampire is a bit misleading. I mean, this guy needs blood transfusions to stay alive. So, I mean, I guess in that sense, he's draining his victims of blood. But, no, overall, I really dug it. Like I said, it had more of like a prison break element to it. With because what it is one prisoner, he was trying to save the life of somebody, and then of course it doesn't work, and his methods were considered kind of like, well, you can't be doing that. That's also mad science. So he ends up getting the death penalty, or he's sent away for a long time. Is what it is. He's going to be sent away to Australia. However, this doctor, the previous one who's doing the mad science, ends up intercepting him and kind of breaking him out of there, but forcing him to serve at his prison where he's, doing these experiments and whatnot. I liked it. Big thumbs up. It only got a 5.5 on IMDb, and that also feels criminal. I don't know what's wrong with you people. You guys are expecting way too much out of these movies. But, yeah, Blood of the Vampire, I highly recommend. So, that was number 9. We're moving on now to number 8, and I'm talking about The Hideous Sun Demon. So basically, this mad scientist gets hit with a big blast of radiation, right? And it ends up kind of turning him into a reverse werewolf. He turns like this lizard creature. However, instead of the full moon bringing it out of him, it's the sun. So anytime he gets exposed to sunlight, he turns into this lizard creature that goes on a rampage. It's kind of funny because the crew was pretty much made up of film students, because it's just cheaper that way. And the cast was mostly unknowns except for writer, director, and star Robert Clark. Robert Clark actually had some success. He was in the movie The Astounding She-Monster. And even though it got bad reviews, it did, well at the box office. And not only, his deal was he got his fee, but he also got 5% of the gross. And so when it did really well, he was like, hey, wait a minute. If I start producing my own films and, write and direct them, which it should be noted he co-wrote and co-directed this, but nonetheless, if I write, direct, and produce my own movies, I can keep more money. And that was his thought process going into The Hideous Sun Demon. This is the only film I should mention that he would go on to write and direct. So, which I don't know if maybe he did produce after this. I'm guessing so. I mean, he definitely wanted to say where the money was at. But this movie was double billed with Attack of the Crab Monsters, and it actually started off successful initially, but the distributor went bankrupt shortly after this, and so unfortunately it tanked almost immediately after that, and he had to pretty much sell off the rights, just to kind of keep his money or whatever. This thing got really bad reviews. However, it did gain kind of a cult following. In fact, some film students would actually make a student film and kind of like an unauthorized sequel called Wrath of the Sun Demon. And then on top of that, there'd be in the 80s 2 comedic dub versions would come out of this film with different people doing the tracks or whatever. And one of them actually featured Jay Leno doing the main guy. So when I hear a young Jay Leno do some voice acting work on The Hideous Sun Demon, check it out. Anyway, what I think about this movie, it was all right. I enjoyed it. Again, it's the same formula we've seen a trillion times. You do kind of feel like this guy bringing on himself a lot. Like, dude, just stay home. Everyone tells him stay home. They're close to finding a cure, and instead he's like, I gotta get me a booze, and he gets out, and it just no matter where he goes, he's a trouble magnet, and it ends up fucking him in the end. But beyond that, again, it's not that bad. I feel like it got a very bad rep, and I know Mystery Science Theater hit it, and it just has its reputation for being a shit film. But honestly, I enjoyed it. Again, it's not breaking new ground in the slightest, but still enjoyable. However, on IMDb, it has a 4.3, which, again, seems like bullshit, but hey, what can you do? It's IMDb. It's the people. They've spoken. They don't like it. I personally thought it was all right, though. So, anyways, we're moving right along now to number 7, The Crawling Eye. So basically, in the Swiss mountains, people were losing their heads. Lots of decapitations, and they think it could be connected to this radioactive cloud that's just kind of hovering around there. Another British horror film. This was actually, there was an episode of Saturday Serial that this was based off of. In fact, it would have its own TV serial too And then they basically just redid that into feature-length film, and that's what we got here. When the movie came out, though, it basically had very middling reviews. Nothing really bad, but nothing really glowing either. Just very like, yep, this was here. This existed. Turns out John Carpenter was actually inspired partially by this movie when he was making The Fog, which you can definitely, get with the, cloud that, contains these squishy eye creatures or whatever. And I also kind of felt like there was a lot of similarities between this and Jordan Peele's Nope as well. But I don't know, it may have just been me. Anyways, what I think about this movie, I liked it. I thought it was really good. I like isolation horror films anyways. And so when you got the whole group of people who are trying to, get out of the mountain and get into the, town below, and they're kind of trapped in this laboratory or whatever, and the clouds around them, and then of course, every time they try to get out, these, and don't get me wrong, the monsters are kind of ridiculous looking. I won't deny that, but still, the tension that's built up, waiting for these cheesy monsters to attack, I thought it was really well done. So I don't know, Creepy Eye, I liked. This thing has a 5.2 on IMDb, and it's got 67% on Rotten Tomatoes. But yeah, no, I gave it higher than that. I thought it was really solid. So. Anyways, yeah, that was number 7, The Crawling Ice. We're going to move on now to number 6, a little movie called The Mummy versus the Human Robot. Basically, if you've been following the Aztec Mummy trilogy, the Bat is back, and this time he ends up building a robot so he can go down into the pyramids to get the Aztec gold. However, we know what's guarding that gold. It's the mummy, so he's building the robot to fight the mummy. Of course, this is a Mexican film. The original title was The Robot versus the Aztec Mummy. However, whenever we watched it, it was under the title The Mummy versus the Human Robot. So that's not I'm putting down, but yeah, for those who are just like, wait a minute, that's not the third one. The original title is The Robot versus the Aztec Mummy. So, and this is the third part of the Aztec Mummy trilogy. Again, I like this series, and it's funny because this whole series, at least thus far, the first 3, is shit on. Like, people rate this so low and just nothing but bad reviews, but I'm like, I don't know, I enjoy it. I think, granted, the sequels rely too much on flashbacks, but I'm like, so did the first 5 minutes of every Friday the 13th as well. They constantly did a little flashback montage every time. This one does a little too much as well, I'll admit it. I think I got worse than this one just because there was 2 movies they had to cover to catch you up on. However, it just has that 1930s/40s style of the old adventure serials and crime fighting serials. It felt a lot like I was watching this old serial, and I don't know, I like that. The idea of, this Aztec mummy, it's, I don't know. I dig the story. I like the idea that he's coming after his gold. I like the idea of, the criminal known as the Bat is building a robot to combat it. I don't know. I'm enjoying it. The only thing I didn't care for in this one was we find out in part 2, spoiler alert for this movie from 1957, but in part 2 we find out that his assistant, the main guy's assistant, I forget the guy's name already, but anyways, the main character's assistant was this wrestling superhero in part 2, and they don't mention that at all in this one. And it's like, granted, he kind of gave it up, I guess, because he's no longer a pussy. Like in this one, he's not really the cowardly guy he was, because you initially think he's a pussy. Part 1, he was, portrayed as I'm a scaredy cat. Even part 2, he's portrayed that way. But then, of course, you find out his secret identity is he's the, masked superhero, pro wrestler superhero. But they didn't even acknowledge that in this, not even one line of oh yeah, remember you used that wrestler at one time? No, nothing. So it's just kind of I don't know, missed opportunity there. I would love to see robots and wrestlers and mummies in the same movie, but we got robbed of that in this one, I guess. Overall, I liked it. IMDb has this ranked at 2.4. Criminal, I say. Fucking criminal. I'll tell you right now, I find this more entertaining than the Universal Mummy movies. They were all the same to me, and just, I don't know, some of them just got kind of boring there after a while. The first one's, really solid, but then beyond that, it's just it's the same movies over and over, and there's no change in setting. I don't know, maybe because it has that Mexican flair to it. Maybe the fact that we got pro wrestlers and robots in the mix. I like it, but again, I'm clearly on my own in this one, and I'm just glad the Retro Horse Academy lets me vote these up when I can. So anyways, The Mummy versus the Human Robot. So now we're moving on to number 5. We're halfway through the list. And the number 5 horror film of 1958 is It, The Terror from Beyond Space. Basically, we had a mission go to Mars that went awry, and so we send a rescue mission to bring the guy back. However, an alien jumps aboard as well. This movie clearly inspired the film Alien, which would come out, with Ridley Scott in the 70s. This was Ray Crash Kerrigan's last film. And I already know who Ray Crash Kerrigan is I watched, he was in Undersea Kingdom, I believe, in a serial from the 30s or whatever. And I've seen him in a few things since then. We covered, he's also known for being in all these these Gorillas Gone Mad movies that we've been covering here on the show. He played a lot of the apes and stuff in those. But anyway, this was his last film. He retired shortly after this. Apparently, the mood on set wasn't that great. I guess Crash would come to set drunk more often than not, and he got to the point where he just stopped listening to the director. Like, director told him to do stuff. He's like, nope, not doing it. Do what I want to do. And then apparently the actress. Sean Smith, she felt like she was above this film. Like, she was insulted that they made her do this B sci-fi horror film. So, what a bitch. Movie takes place in the faraway future of 1973, which I had to laugh when I saw that. And apparently in London, this thing received an X rating. Now, I'm sure their X rating was not porno related like it is here. But even our X rating initially didn't start out that way. Our X rating was initially kind of NC-17. So I'm guessing there was kind of like the R-rated version. But either way, it received an X rating. The original title was going to be It, the Vampire from Outer Space, but I guess they dropped the vampire nonsense and went with just Alien, so, worked out. And this movie would reuse props from Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, and Destination Moon. So there you have it. I like this movie. Again, it's Alien. It's Alien, like, stripped down, and it's, old and not nearly as scary as Alien, but the formula works, and it's still damn good. And you're still, it makes you wonder, it's going to be a body count movie, who's going to get knocked off neck. And so with that, I was actually, kind of on the edge of the seat, waiting to see who bit it next. Overall, big thumbs up. This thing got a 6.0 on IMDb and a 75% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, congrats, It, the Terror from Beyond Space. This is a movie I could have watched so much earlier. My uncle was really big on a lot of these old 50s black and white sci-fi movies, and I only watched maybe a handful with him, and I don't know. I really regret it now because a lot of them I'm really liking. I could have been a fan earlier, I guess, but I'm discovering them now, and that's the important thing. So, all right, moving on to number 4, and I'm talking about The Blob. That's right. This blob comes from outer space, and it starts eating just anybody in its path, and it gets bigger and bigger. This was Steve McQueen's first leading role, and it was double billed with I Married a Monster from Outer Space. The catchy theme song, Beware the Blob, in the very beginning of the movie, was actually written by, or co-written, by Burt Bacharach. In fact, he and some session musicians got together and they formed, really just for this song only, a band called the Five Blobs. And the song actually became a hit outside this movie. So I think it peaked at like number 33 on the billboards or whatever. So that's pretty crazy. I think I mentioned last episode that, there's a wave of teenage drive-in films. And this was definitely a part of that. Drive-ins was becoming very successful at this point. And, it didn't take a lot to get them into the drive-in, so any kind of schlock you can throw together, it would usually be profitable. And this was a good example of that, I think. Yeah, they, right era, right time, and yeah. And again, it's a group of, teenagers rebelling against, so as another, this is the age of, James Dean and, Rebel Without Cause and greasers and motorcycle gangs and, parents are bad, we're rebelling against them kind of thing. So this movie played right into that, again, a bunch of kids who are trying to tell the adults, hey, there's something bad going on. And this is really the first time we focused on teens in these kind of movies, which is funny because now horror is more associated with a younger crowd. But, back before this, there's always straight-laced businessmen and shit, but now, or astronauts, but at this point now it's like, nope, it's the kids. This initially got bad reviews when it came out. In fact, it was actually on Joe Dante's list for worst horror films ever. However, scientist Neil deGrasse Tyson, he likes this. In fact, it's his favorite alien on screen. In fact, this thing was. In fact, the reviews were bad. This thing became very popular when it was released. In fact, it was so popular that after its first week in circulation, they actually doubled the number of prints, and widened its release because it was making so much money. This would be followed by a sequel, Beware the Blob, also known as Son of Blob. I guess depending on which print you got. And this was remade in 1988. In fact, they've been working on a remake since the 2000s, but it just keeps falling through. It's currently in development hell right now, but yeah, another Blob. The diner in which the Blob kind of overtakes later in the movie, it had actually been moved to the studio, on the studio lot. However, they actually put another diner in its place there, and they got pictures and posters of the Blob, and they got a lot of like Blob themed items on their menu or whatnot. So if you're ever in whatever Pennsylvania town this was filmed in, you can find that Blob diner. Hey, have at it. I would love to go check it out sometime. It'd be really neat. This is the last time that Steve McQueen would be billed as Stephen McQueen. Apparently he's like, no more Steven. I'm Steve. And anyways, Steve McQueen was 28 when he was in this film, when he filmed this. Even though he's playing a teenager. And I'll tell you right now, I honestly thought he was older than even 28. I assumed he was probably in his mid to late 30s. And if you would have told me he was in his 40s, I would not have been surprised. That's a rough 28. And rough looking teenager at that. That was the 50s. Everybody was smoking and just drinking nonstop. So yeah, they definitely aged quite a bit during that. And yeah, it turned out, I guess Steve McQueen actually hated this movie. However, I read somewhere else that like when he died, they found the poster of this movie in his room. So I don't know. I mean, that may just be urban myth or whatever, but I don't know. That's what I heard. Anyways, what I think about this movie, it was alright. I'll be honest with you. I love the concept of the Blob. In fact, my favorite segment in Creepshow was in Creepshow 2, The Raft, which is basically the same type of monster, a black blob on the lake. That, to me, is scary. The idea of, like, some kind of like in the movie Life, some kind of gelatin wrapping itself around you and just devouring you. That's so fucking painful and brutal. But for some reason, the actual official Blob movies that we get, this one and even the 88 version, I've never seen the sequel, so I can't comment on it, but as far as this one and the remake, I just could never get into either of them. I don't know why. This one I thought was okay. Don't get me wrong. I'm giving this a thumbs up. I like the Blob overall. I like the story. It's entertaining enough, but I don't know. I just feel like it just looks cheesy, I guess. I don't know. It just doesn't get brutal enough. And I know like the 80s version is pretty fucking grotesque, but I don't know. I tried watching that not too long ago and I couldn't get into it again. But that's just me. That's just my opinion. On IMDb, this has a 6.3. Has a 68% on Rotten Tomatoes. And this thing grossed $4 million back in 1958. 1958 money. That's fucking crazy. So, there you guys have it. The Blob, number 4. We're moving on now to our number 3 horror film of 1958. And the winner of the Bronze Skull Award. I am talking about The Fly. Scientist is working on his teleportation device, and shit goes haywire. This film would be followed by a couple sequels, and it would also get remade by director David Cronenberg in the 80s. Apparently the scene where you hear the little guy in the web going, "Help me, help me." I guess cast and crew would just break every time they would hear them. I guess they played the voice, and it's like, what? Anyway, I guess they just laughed all the time. I think Vincent Price said like they had to redo that take like 20 times before they kind of got it themselves under control, which is just hilarious to hear. And kind of sad news, the director, Kurt Newman, I think that's how you pronounce his name, he actually passed away shortly, like a month after this movie came out. And I think it didn't even get like a full release just yet either. He would die shortly afterwards, and unfortunately, he wouldn't know it, but this would be his biggest success. So it's kind of sad to hear, he didn't get to see, the movie he made, blow up like it did. But, unfortunately, it's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. Speaking of it being a big hit, this was actually one of Fox's biggest movies that year. Despite, it had bad reviews when it came out. And the weird thing is, though, like when I looked at the reviews for from today, going back looking at it, the reviews didn't get much better. Like a lot of people were just like, well, yeah, it's considered a classic. But, and it's like every one of them was just either negative or it had that but to it. Like, I don't know, no one would just be like, it's a great movie. So I thought that was kind of funny. Cause I assumed, and I'll be honest with you, this is the first time I watched, I've seen the remake before, I've never seen the original. I assumed this must have been like a classic because it was just like, everyone talks about it. But it's like, no, Not to be. Thought the kid looked familiar. The kid who played the Fly's son, I guess. Turned out he was the kid that was in 13 Ghost, which would come out 2 years later. But yeah, I was like, this kid looks familiar. And I actually had to look him up. It bugged me that much. I was like, I know I've seen this kid somewhere else. 13 Ghost. Turned out this film, House of Wax, and The Tingler would solidify Vincent Price as the king of horror. Like at this point, they knew this was the guy. Even though he's been kind of doing horror films for a long time now, and he's already in our Hall of Fame, but apparently it takes a while for the mainstream to catch on. So they finally did. So there you go. The sound of the teleporter would actually be reused in the film The Time Machine. In fact, I think a lot of the sound effects in this movie was also used in War of the Worlds as well. So. This was based on a short story, and in the short story, the ending's a little bit different. The wife would actually kill herself after she tells them the whole thing. She would wind up just killing herself. And Fox executives were like, "Yeah, we're not doing that. That's too much of a downer. We can't have suicide." So yeah, they changed the ending right there. One thing about this movie, I enjoyed it. Again, I'm kind of mad scientist out right now, but I thought the story was really good. I really love Vincent Price. In fact, I thought Vincent Price was the Fly. Like this, when you hear about you hear the title of The Fly, and it stars Vincent Price, you assume because he's the monster / villain in everything he does. I assumed he was the Fly, so I was really shocked that he played like the straight normal guy in this movie, and he does a good job at it. Like I wasn't disappointed by Vincent Price and his good guy performance here. So I don't know. It was one of those things where I was pleasantly surprised by that. Again, the story, even though I knew it from the remake and it doesn't get quite as gruesome as the remake, the same basic fundamental elements are there. And so, I don't know, damn good story, decent story. I'm giving it the old thumbs up. This actually has a 7.1 on IMDb and a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. And it would actually go on to gross 2.4 million at the box office. 2.4, not 200, sorry. So yeah, there you have it. Our Bronze Skull winner and number 3 horror film of 1958, The Fly. So now we're going on to number 2. The number 2 horror film of 1958. And the winner of the Silver Skull Award, fitting, because this is called The Screaming Skull. We have a married couple who are moving into their house, and it turns out that the husband's been married once before. And now his new wife thinks the old wife is haunting her. Yes. I'll get to justifying this later, I guess. It'll be the same basic speech I gave to other bombs that get this high up there. So the actor that played Mickey in this movie was a guy named Alex Nicole, and he actually was the director as well. And he became a director because he was feeling he wasn't getting the roles he wanted whenever he was acting normally. And so he decided, I'll become a director and then cast myself in the roles I want. And so this is the first time he does it. The story is based on a book. However, that book was even based on like an urban legend that came before about basically the slave. They refused to bury him. And for whatever reason, they kept his skull and they put it like in a box or whatever. However, as legend goes, you could hear the skull screaming from time to time in the night. So that's kind of where the origins of this whole thing kind of came from. The cinematographer of this movie actually just came off from winning an Oscar. So talk about slumping, and after that, damn, what a fall from grace that must have been. The main actress, Peggy Weber, she would get pregnant during this film. And they had to do some rewrites and then change some scenes, because there's a scene she's supposed to get fall down the stairs. And she's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Which I'm like, can you not get like a stunt woman? But again, this is very low budget, so maybe not. The opening credits, or the opening scene, was where they tell you hey, this movie is so scary that if you die while watching it, we'll pay for your funeral or whatever. This is the same gimmick that William Castle would use in his film, The Macabre. However, in that movie, he actually did take out, he talked to the insurance company and actually took out policies, whereas they didn't do it here. It was just the part of the movie or whatever. Without doubt, this thing got some really bad reviews when it dropped. In fact, even the main actress, Peggy, she hated this film as well. So yeah, I agree. I did not like this movie at all. I got outvoted on this thing, and it got upvoted way more than I thought it should. Anyways, I get it though. Don't get me wrong. There's some movies I like that are notoriously bad that I fight for. King of the Zombies come to mind. So when somebody's trying to push the Screaming Skull, have at it. In my opinion, this movie is just dull. I don't mind the story. I think the story, is classic or whatever. In fact, I think he even kind of compared it to like he's trying to do like a Hitchcock type movie, do like Rebecca. And it's like, I get it. I do. But at the same time, it's like, this thing was just so drab. So, I don't know. It was very melodramatic and just boring. And like I said, and then when it kind of gets to the climax and you see the screaming skull, it does kind of come off goofy or whatever. Cool concept. I remember, when I used to work at a movie theater, the guy who would deliver our some of the prints, this guy's like a metalhead artist, horror fanatic, but it's like cinema in general. But I remember the first time we actually talked was because of this shirt, because he had a Screaming Skull shirt on. I was like, dude, I didn't think he even knew what this movie was. And he's like, he goes, actually, a friend gave it to me or whatever. And I was like, oh, and we just started talking right there. But our friendship came out of this movie right here, so it is what it is. Like I said, I'm not huge on it. IMDb gave it a 3.9, and yep, that's probably fair. Probably a little too generous, if I'm being honest. But anyways, it is what it is. The Screaming Skull, our Silver Skull winner and number 2 film. So that now means we're moving on to what is our number 1 horror film from 1958. And the winner of the Golden Skull Award, I'm talking of Horror of Dracula. So, Jonathan Harker takes a job as a librarian for Count Dracula. However, he's got other motives here, and that just pisses Dracula off. Anyways, long story short, Van Helsing has to come in for the rescue and try to, not just save Jonathan Harker, but destroy Count Dracula in the process. This is, of course, British horror. This is a Hammer horror. This stars Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this or not, Michael Gough. He was Alfred in the Batman movies, the Tim Burton ones. Actually, all 4 of the first ones. But anyways, originally this was just Dracula. In fact, in Britain, this is just known as Dracula. But here in America, we changed it to Horror of Dracula, namely because at the time, Dracula, the original 1931 Universal horror film, was in its re-release. So we were, didn't want people to get confused, so we changed this name. Even though this is not the first movie to feature fanged vampires, I believe that distinction goes to some kind of Finnish movie. Never heard of it when I read it. Anyways, this is the one that kind of took fangs into the mainstream with vampires. I didn't even think about that, because they're right. You don't see fangs in the Universal horror films at all. Of course, we didn't see tits and blood and shit like that either. But Hammer's doing their thing. Anyways, but yeah. So this was the first movie that people kind of associate with the fanged Dracula. Even though, again, some Finnish movie beams the punch, but I didn't even know what that Finnish movie was. Like, it didn't even come on our radar when we were covering international horror films from prior, so clearly it wasn't that big of a movie. Anyways, so they always asked the writer, Jimmy Sangster, was he trying to, the reason he changed the script, from the original book and movie or whatever, did he have a reason? Was it artistic reasons, whatever? And he's just like, nope, did for budgetary reasons, which I respect the hell out of. It's like, we got to cut some shit out, cut storylines out completely, cut subplots, cut characters, cut travel. Like, we're just getting down to the bare bones. However, the one thing they all agree on was in this film that, the idea of making Dracula more of a sexual figure and having sexuality be a kind of undercurrent theme throughout this film was intentional. Like, they all, from Christopher Lee down to, the director, Terrence Fisher, and the writer, that was literally what they were going for. So it's like, oh, there you go. And I think that's, a lot of people agree. Like, I think at the time they were like, yep, we want to bang that Dracula. So this thing came out with great reviews. Kind of the first time we're hearing about this with this era, because literally everything else was like mixed reviews or negative reviews. This was the first one that was like, nope, everybody loved Dracula. And they should, because it's an awesome fucking movie. This was in the top 12 at the British box office for 1958. This thing would be followed by 8 sequels, which is fucking crazy. Christopher Lee only had like 16 lines in the entire movie. In fact, by the 10-minute mark of this film, he's done talking. We don't hear him say a word the rest of the film. Like, most of his conversation was with Jonathan Harker in the very beginning. That's it. In fact, Christopher Lee is only on camera for like 7.5 minutes. So just goes to show you just how impactful those 7.5 minutes was. Like, he was almost like Hannibal Lecter and Anthony Hopkins from Silence of the Lambs. Like, he literally just, what little time he had, he made the most of it. So this is the first time that Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing would share top billing. Obviously, would not be the last, but it's like a dream team. They become like the new Karloff and the Lugosi of the UK. So it's awesome. The reason that they made the character of Van Helsing much younger was simply because Peter Cushing did not want to endure the makeup to make him look older. He's like, I'm not going to sit in the makeup chair for that long. And they're just like, yeah, fine, we'll just make the character younger. Who cares? And I'm like, brilliant, fucking brilliant. Which I think that's the right call anyways. Like, I don't want an old man going after Dracula. Like, give me a young guy. Give me somebody that actually put up a fight. Peter Cushing would actually go on to play Van Helsing 4 more times after this. And I think they said Christopher Lee would do it like 6 more times, at least in the sequels. Maybe he did vampire stuff beyond this. I don't know, but I know as far as the sequel go, he would do it 6 more times. Apparently, Christopher Lee and Bela Lugosi were the only 2 actors to ever play both Dracula and Frankenstein's monster, which I can only assume that's true. I don't know. I didn't actually look up further than what the IMDb page told me, but that is what it says. So, anyways, one thing about this movie, I loved it. I gotta say right now, because I'm gonna mention when we talk about Curse of Frankenstein, that I haven't seen too many of the Hammer horror movies. I only seen like a handful, and I know the Universal stuff. And I gotta say right now, just the first Dracula and the first Frankenstein, yeah, they're both hands down way better than anything that Universal has done at this point. Like, this is how you do a Dracula. That's how you do a Frankenstein. Like, these are the movies. So, I'm pumped for Mummy. And I can't wait for the sequels. And I know the sequels will kind of dip in quality as they go, but that's just as per usual with any horror franchise. So I'm prepared for it. But I really dug it. I like the changes they make, regardless of the reasons. I said the same thing in Frankenstein, or Curse of Frankenstein. I love that they made the character more of an asshole, made him more villainous in that one, as opposed to being the I'm trying to do the right thing, but it went wrong. Science that we've been doing for fucking ages. It was refreshing, and I felt the same thing about watching Dracula. This is just a refreshing take on the story, so I loved it. Thought it was really good. So big thumbs up for me. Definitely deserves a spot as our number 1 and our Golden Skull Award winner. So IMDb gave this a 7.2, and it's got 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, and this thing made $3.5 million at the box office. So there you have it. So guys, that was the year in horror of 1958. To do a quick recap of the movies that we've covered. At number 10, it was Black Cat Mansion. Number 9, Blood of the Vampires. Number 8, The Hideous Sun Demon. Number 7, The Crawling Eye. Number 6, The Mummy versus the Human Robot. Number 5, It, The Terror from Beyond Space. Number 4, The Blob. Number 3, The Fly. Number 2, The Screaming Skull. And number 1, Horror of Dracula. So guys, there you have it. That was 1958 in the year of horror. I want to thank you guys all for listening. On behalf of the Retro Horror Academy, my name is Daniel Richardson, and you're dismissed.